Today, I want you to imagine a headline that none of us ever want to read, but one that no longer feels unthinkable. Iran, Russia, and China versus the United States and NATO. Not a proxy war, not cyber skirmishes, not sanctions and speeches. A real, open, strategic confrontation. Now, let me be very clear from the start. This is not fear-mongering. This is not Hollywood. This is an analytical exercise, grounded in history, power dynamics, and the uncomfortable reality of where the world stands right now. Because the truth is, when global tensions rise to this level, the most dangerous moment isn't when the first missile is fired. The most dangerous moment is when leaders begin to believe that war might actually benefit them. So today we're going to build the picture carefully. Where did this confrontation come from? Why are these particular blocs facing each other? And what kind of war are we really talking about? If it ever begins, stay with me. The world is already divided, we just don't like to admit it. Since the end of World War II, the global system has revolved around one central idea: American-led order. The United States didn't just win wars, it built institutions: NATO, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN system, designed to lock in its influence. And for decades, that system worked. Not perfectly, but effectively. The Cold War ended, the Soviet Union collapsed, and for a brief moment, the world believed something extraordinary. That great power war might be over. But history doesn't disappear. It waits. Russia never accepted the idea that NATO should expand to its borders. China never accepted a world where Western rules defined global power. Iran never accepted American dominance in the Middle East. Different grievances, different cultures, but one shared conclusion: the current system does not serve them. That's the foundation of this potential alliance. Not friendship, not ideology, shared opposition. Why Iran, Russia, and China are even on the same side. Let's break this down clearly, because this is where many people get it wrong. Iran, Russia, and China do not trust each other deeply. They don't share values. They don't even share long-term visions. What they share is pressure. Russia is under heavy Western sanctions, isolated from European markets, and locked in a long confrontation over Ukraine and NATO expansion. Iran faces decades of sanctions, military encirclement, and constant pressure over its nuclear program and regional influence. China is economically intertwined with the West, but strategically preparing for a world where that relationship could fracture, especially over Taiwan. Each of these countries on its own has limits. Together they create something much more complicated. Russia brings military experience, nuclear depth, and energy leverage. China brings industrial scale, economic gravity, and technological reach. Iran brings regional disruption power, from the Persian Gulf to the Levant. This is not a traditional alliance like NATO. This is a convergence of convenience, and that makes it unpredictable. The United States and NATO, power, but also pressure. Now let's talk about the other side of this equation. The United States and NATO still represent the most powerful military coalition in human history. That part is not up for debate. Advanced air power, global naval dominance, integrated command structures, and a network of allies that stretches across Europe, Asia, and beyond. But power does not mean freedom from stress. America today is managing commitments in Europe, commitments in the Middle East, commitments in the Indo-Pacific, all at the same time. NATO, meanwhile, is united, but not uniform. Some countries are willing to take risks. Others are cautious. Some have strong militaries. Others rely almost entirely on American protection. So while NATO looks solid on paper, any large-scale war would immediately test its political cohesion. And that matters, because modern wars aren't just won with weapons. They're won with endurance. What kind of war are we actually talking about? Here's where we need to slow down and be precise. A war between these blocs would almost certainly not begin with nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are not tools of victory. They are tools of deterrence. The real conflict would unfold across multiple layers: regional conventional wars, cyber warfare, economic warfare, information warfare, proxy conflicts. Imagine this scenario. Tensions spike in the Persian Gulf. At the same time, pressure increases around Taiwan. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe remains unstable. None of these conflicts are officially connected, but strategically, they are coordinated. This is what modern great power conflict looks like. Not one battlefield, many pressure points. And that's where things get dangerous. The Middle East, Iran's home turf. If war begins, Iran's strongest advantage is geography, the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, regional networks across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Iran doesn't need to defeat the U.S. militarily in a traditional sense. It needs to raise the cost, disrupt shipping lanes, target regional bases, apply pressure through allies and proxies. Even limited disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would send shockwaves through global energy markets. And that's not speculation, that's math. A significant portion of the world's oil flows through that narrow stretch of water. In war, geography becomes leverage, and Iran knows how to use it. Russia's strategic calculation. Russia's interest in a broader confrontation is deeply strategic and deeply cautious. Moscow understands one thing very well. A direct, full-scale war with NATO would be catastrophic. But Russia also understands something else. A distracted United States is a weaker United States. If Washington is pulled simultaneously into crises in the Middle East and East Asia, Europe becomes harder to prioritize. From Russia's perspective, a multi-front global strain on the U.S. could rebalance power even without decisive battlefield victories. This is not about conquest. It's about strategic exhaustion. History shows us that empires rarely fall because they lose one big battle. They fall because they are stretched too thin. China's long game China is the most complex player in this equation. Beijing does not want chaos, it wants control. Its economy depends on global trade. Its legitimacy depends on stability and growth. But China is also preparing for a world where the U.S. no longer sets all the rules. In a major global confrontation, China's ideal position is not the front line. It is the balancer, providing economic lifelines, exerting diplomatic pressure, positioning itself as indispensable to any future settlement, and yes, keeping Taiwan firmly in focus. Any U.S. commitment elsewhere inevitably affects American capacity in the Pacific. China doesn't need to rush. Time, in many ways, is on its side. Escalation without control. Here's the most unsettling part of this entire discussion. No one involved truly controls escalation anymore. Modern military systems are fast. Decisions are compressed into minutes. Information, true or false, travels instantly. A drone incident, a cyber attack misattributed, a regional ally acting independently. That's how wars spiral, not because leaders want apocalypse, but because systems move faster than diplomacy. And once blood is spilled, political space disappears. The illusion of winning. At this stage, I want you to notice something important. No one in this story is talking about victory parades. No one is promising clean outcomes. Instead, the conversation is about who can endure longer, who can absorb more economic pain, who can keep their society stable under pressure. That should tell us everything. When great powers talk this way, it means the system itself is under strain. Setting the stage. So let's take stock. We have a dissatisfied bloc seeking to revise the global order, a dominant coalition trying to preserve it, regional flashpoints that can ignite simultaneously economic interdependence that makes war ruinously expensive, and political systems under internal pressure on all sides. This is not 1939. This is not the Cold War. This is something new, and in some ways more fragile. So now we go deeper, because once you strip away the flags, the alliances, the speeches, and the military hardware, one hard question remains. If a war breaks out between Iran, Russia, China on one side, and the United States with NATO on the other, who actually benefits? Not who survives, not who looks strong on television, who wins, and more importantly, who pays the price? Let's start with the brutal truth. War always has winners. This is uncomfortable to say, but it's historically true. In every major global conflict, there are players who gain power, leverage, or long-term advantage, even when the overall outcome is destruction. The key is understanding what kind of benefit we're talking about. Not moral victory, not stability, strategic advantage. In this scenario, no side walks away untouched, but some actors may walk away stronger relative to others. Let's break it down, slowly, clearly, without slogans. The United States, power versus overextension. If you look at raw military capability, the United States and NATO still hold the upper hand. Advanced air superiority, global force projection, unmatched intelligence networks. In a direct conventional clash, especially early on, the US would likely dominate key battle spaces. But wars are not won in the opening weeks. They are won or lost over time. Here's the American dilemma. The US would be fighting not one enemy, but a strategic alignment across regions. Middle East pressure from Iran, European pressure linked to Russia, Pacific pressure tied to China. Even if these fronts never fully merge into one coordinated war, the psychological and logistical strain would be enormous. The real risk for Washington is not defeat, it's drain. Economic pressure from prolonged conflict, political polarization at home, allied fatigue abroad. History shows us something critical. America is strongest when it fights one major war at a time. Multiple theaters, that's where cracks begin to form. So does the US win militarily? Possibly. Does it emerge stronger, more stable, and more unified? That's far less certain. NATO, unity tested under fire. NATO's greatest strength has always been collective defense. An attack on one is an attack on all. But that principle has rarely been tested in a truly global multi-front confrontation. In this scenario, NATO's biggest challenge would not be weapons, it would be politics. Different threat perceptions, different tolerance for risk, different levels of economic exposure. Some countries would push for escalation, others would urge restraint. And that internal tension matters, because modern war demands consensus, especially in democracies. If NATO holds together, it remains a formidable force. If unity weakens, even slightly, adversaries will exploit it immediately. That's not speculation, that's strategy. Russia, not winning, but rebalancing. Russia does not need to defeat NATO to benefit from a broader conflict. What Russia seeks is strategic repositioning. A world where NATO expansion slows or halts, US attention is divided. Western economic pressure loses effectiveness. In a prolonged global crisis, energy markets destabilize, and Russia knows energy. Even under sanctions, global disruption creates bargaining power. Russia's potential win is not territory, it's leverage, a seat at the table where rules are renegotiated. But make no mistake, this comes at a cost. Russia's economy is smaller than that of NATO combined. Its population base is limited. A long war would strain its society deeply. So for Moscow, this is a high-risk recalculation, not a guaranteed gain. Iran, chaos as a strategic tool. Iran's position is often misunderstood. Tehran does not aim to conquer global power. Iran's strategy is simpler and more dangerous. Make intervention too expensive. In a wider war, Iran's value lies in its ability to disrupt oil flows, disrupt regional stability, disrupt political calculations. Even limited success in these areas sends shockwaves through global markets. Energy prices spike, inflation rises, public pressure grows, especially in Western democracies. Iran's win is not survival alone. It's forcing recognition, forcing negotiation, forcing the world to accept that it cannot be sidelined. But again, this path risks devastating retaliation. Iranian infrastructure, economy, and civilian population would face enormous danger. There are no clean victories here. China, the quiet beneficiary. Now we come to the most debated question. Does China benefit the most from a global confrontation it didn't start? Potentially, yes. And here's why. China's strength lies in patience. If the US and its allies are consumed by crises in Europe and the Middle East, America's ability to focus fully on the Indo-Pacific weakens. That doesn't mean China launches a war tomorrow. It means China gains strategic breathing room, time to strengthen regional influence, time to deepen economic ties with the global South, time to present itself as an alternative power broker. China could position itself as a mediator, an economic stabilizer, a necessary partner in ending chaos. That narrative matters. However, China also risks massive economic fallout. Global trade disruption hits Beijing hard. Investor confidence matters to legitimacy at home. So China's benefit depends on one thing: control. If chaos remains limited, China gains influence. If chaos spirals, everyone loses, including China. The hidden players, defense, energy, and power brokers. Now let's talk about actors that don't sit at the UN table, but always show up in wartime. Defense industries, energy conglomerates, private security and logistics networks. Historically, large-scale conflict accelerates, weapons production, technological militarization, resource consolidation. These sectors often profit, even as nations bleed. This is not conspiracy, it's structure. War reshapes markets as much as borders. But here's the catch: short-term profit does not equal long-term stability. Eventually, the bill comes due. The human cost, the part we don't put on maps. Now we shift the lens away from capitals and command centers toward ordinary people, because this is where the real damage unfolds. Higher food prices, energy shortages, job losses, refugee flows, social unrest. A global conflict doesn't stay on battlefields. It enters kitchens, classrooms, hospitals, and it doesn't matter whether you live in New York, Berlin, Tehran, or Jakarta. Global systems are interconnected. Suffering travels fast, and once societies are under stress, political extremes gain ground. That's how instability reproduces itself. Three possible futures. Let's end this analysis by looking forward. Not predictions, but scenarios. Scenario 1. Controlled confrontation. Tensions rise. Conflicts remain regional. Back-channel diplomacy stays alive. The world becomes colder, more divided, but avoids collapse. This is the best bad outcome. Scenario 2. Prolonged global strain. Multiple proxy wars. Economic fragmentation. Growing mistrust between blocs. No decisive winner. Just exhaustion. This is the most likely path. Scenario 3. Strategic miscalculation. A single incident escalates beyond control. Rapid decisions. Massive retaliation. This is the scenario everyone fears and prepares for. And history tells us this: the most dangerous wars are not planned, they are stumbled into. The final question. So now we come to the question that matters more than all the rest. In a world where no one truly wins, where power comes at the cost of stability, where ordinary people bear the heaviest burden, is the current global order worth preserving at any cost? Or is the world heading toward a painful restructuring, whether we want it or not? That is the question leaders avoid answering directly, and that is the question the next decade will answer for us. The real war in the end may not be about territory or power, but about what kind of world survives after the smoke clears.